Bryant-Moore. Oh, I didn't mention that Dr. Moore has also done things for the AME Church as far as holding programs and that sort of thing where we might understand and learn what is going on in our Black community. So I'm excited about her.
Thank you. So is this mic on that I need to use this one? Okay. All right. Well, I am so excited to be here and to be in a setting that I can talk about faith and religion openly. At UMS, at the state institution, we have to use code words for a lot of things around there, so we don't get in trouble. So I am just so honored to be here at Shorter College and just share some of my research with you. So first I want to see a show of hands of how many people are interested in research. Woohoo, I like that. So I'm also here to recruit. So when you finish your degree here at Shorter College and you're interested in pursuing a graduate degree in health, please see me. I have my cards. Whether it's in nursing, in public health, or anything, please let me know. We have pathways to our doctoral program, so I'm always out there to recruit because, again, really to address the things that we have in our African American community, we need more people who are African American doing that work. And I look around, as far as my coworkers and around UAMS, and we are not represented the way we need to be. So I always have to start with that. So I'm always here recruiting. So I want to just share with you some things because I know I have a time limit. And when I start talking about my own work, I get really excited and I can stand up here for like 3 or 4 hours. And so I make sure I stick to the time frame. But I moved to Arkansas in 2009. I was living in Southern California for about 7 or 8 years. My parents are actually from Arkadelphia, and they moved, retired back in Hot Springs. And so I'm a big baby, and I followed them here to Arkansas. But it really felt like a homecoming for me as well, even though I didn't even grow up here. But I was particularly interested in working with African Americans. I didn't think specifically the faith community at the time. When I initially did my work, it was around African Americans, males, and their experience with depression. As a clinician in the clinic, I was seeing men come into the clinic with symptoms of depression. They didn't know what it was. And it was to the point that they could not function. They couldn't make it to work. They just couldn't do the things that they normally did. So that was my initial interest. And then just talking to some of the people at UMS and folks within the community, they were like, actually, there is someone in Blytheville up in Mississippi County that's interested in your work and interested in partnering with you. So I didn't know where Blytheville was, but I was excited somebody was interested in what I was doing. So that really started my work in the Arkansas Delta region right after I got here in 2009. And just looking at what's going on in that region as far as economics, chronic health conditions, just access to health care. If you look at the life expectancy between up in Springdale, Fayetteville area comparison to Helena, West Helena, it's almost a 10-year difference. And so to actually know those things, and then you look in the Delta and who's there, and there's a lot of African Americans, right? So obviously, if you have all these things going on, that's going to impact your mental health. And so we really wanted to not only look at what was going on, I kind of mentioned all these things before as far as the poverty, life expectancy, and illness, but we wanted to think of a different way of approaching things. So we wanted to look at the assets, not just what was going on bad and what we didn't have. And so we thought about the church. The church is an asset, a huge asset. And you go up in the Blytheville area like it is around here too, there's a church. If it's not on every corner, it's on every other corner. And so that's an asset that we needed to really tap into and to partner with. Fortunately, the university that I went to for my Ph.D. was actually a Christian university, Azusa Pacific in Azusa, California. And I specifically went there for my own personal interest in learning more about religion and spirituality, and it was incorporated into my nursing program. So I felt like this was, like God was laying out a plan for me, and I didn't know it at the time, but it matched up perfectly of what the needs were and the assets within the community and what I had been learning all along. So I do something called community-based participatory research. So normally you have people that just come to the community, tell you what's wrong with your community, and then tell you how you need to fix it. I don't go with that approach because, like I said, I'm not even from the area. So how am I going to go in there and tell somebody how to fix a problem I don't really understand? So with community-based participatory research, the researcher partners with the community every step of the way to figure out what's going on, what are we going to do about it, and then how are we going to actually address it. So at the very beginning, I really needed to understand the beliefs, and I was looking specifically around depression of the rural African-American faith community. And so we ended up doing focus groups up in Mississippi County. And some of the things, a couple of quotes that came out of this is, there's a word, depression, that makes them feel like they're on the borderline of going crazy. Ain't nobody going to talk about being depressed because they kind of put some labels on you. And them labels make you want to stay underground. They want you to tell about it. So a lot of it was being in a small community and there's a few mental health places. If somebody see your car there, then they can be like, oh, you crazy, there's something wrong with you. We saw your car there, we know something going on. And that's how people felt. And then there was also too, if the therapist lived in their area and they run into them at Walmart, they don't know to speak or not. So they were like, well, where can you go where it's not gonna be a stigma or people are not gonna question your car is there? At the church. People are in and out all the time. And the thing is, where do people say you go and lay your burdens down? At the church. And so they was like, well, if we do that, you know, this is some of the things we started thinking about. Some other beliefs that started coming out that some I was aware of and some I wasn't, was what the causes of depression were. Some people say it's a lack of faith in God. Some said it was a generational curse. And, you know, I've heard of generational curses, but I never thought of it in the sense of depression. And so when I, as a nurse, think about depression and it running through families, I think of genetic causes, right? I never thought of it as your granddaddy did something he wasn't supposed to. Now he cursed the whole family and it goes down from generation to generation. So the thing is, if I'm coming from the medical view of this way, and people are coming from the spiritual view, then where's a disconnect, right? And how we need to address it is not going to be connected. Now, addressing the spiritual part of things, I need to partner with the pastors, right? And to figure out what's going on. If it is actually a genetic thing or this person needs medication, then we need to partner with the medical side. And there's no reason why the two can't be going on at the same time and that we can't address it together. Some other things that came out of it was demonic possession. Now, I had heard about that back in the day. People were thinking about people having seizures. I don't know if y'all heard about that, and the belief that the seizures were caused by demonic possession. But I never thought about it far as depression. And the same thing of it's attack of the devil. Now, we always know the devil attacking. But, you know, I never thought about it as that being the cause of somebody's depression. And the last thing was that the person wasn't actively doing what they're supposed to do. They weren't going to church like they're supposed to. They weren't praying like they're supposed to. They weren't reading the Bible like they're supposed to. And so they were saying that is the cause. And if you start doing what you're supposed to do, far as going to church and everything, then that's going to alleviate the problem. So me having a better understanding of some of the beliefs that are out there made it a little bit clearer on how to actually address and support people. Some other thoughts that aren't unique to the faith community is that depression is not a real medical condition and is a result of personal weakness, which both are not true, but people will believe that yes, it is diagnosable, and then yes, it is not a result of somebody's personal weakness or not. It may be the way you be able to cope with it. So I just wanted, just for a reminder of what major depression really is. So the two that have the stars by it are the things that you have to have in order to be diagnosed with depression. So that's little interest or pleasure in doing things and feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. The other symptoms as far as your sleeping, your eating habits, thinking bad about yourself, difficulty concentrating, suicidal thoughts, those types of things. These things, it has to be how many and how often. So you look at this list, I have little pleasure of interest in doing some things right now, but it's because I'm just tired. So it's not because I'm depressed, it's just I'm wore out. And so when you look at these symptoms and a list of them, you have to take them into context too of what's going on with that person. If you just lost your child, to some terminal illness, yes, you're going to feel a lot of these symptoms, but that doesn't mean that it's depression. It could be grief or something else going on. And so I always had to tell my mother, because every time I'm talking about depression, she goes around trying to diagnose folks. And I said, no, we can't just go around saying who's depressed and who isn't, but we can see, well, who may need some support and who doesn't, right? So from all those focus groups, some things really came out from the faith community as far as suggestions of the roles of the church, the person, and then the lay people within the church community. So the roles of the church, they feel like is a holistic approach to man. So not just looking at the spiritual, but also looking at the physical and the mental well-being of people. To be a support system for people, provide health information, referrals, and health services. And so how to do that would actually be to incorporate programming within the church to manage, they said specifically stress, to address the needs of every person differently, and to change the depression terminology that we use so it's less stigmatizing, and to educate the community about depression. As far as the pastor or clergy perspective, the leadership within the church, they said we need to provide spiritual guidance and support, preach and minister hope, recognize depression, and take appropriate actions. I had some pastors actually tell me that they were afraid to refer people because saying that, oh, you think I'm crazy now, why are you gonna try to refer me like that? But if we have a whole support system that everybody's been educated and realizing there's no shame in that. And that we're here, we love you, we support you, we want the best for you. And just because somebody refers or make recommendations, it's just to support the people. And again, the clergy said they felt like they need to be educated more about depression. And obviously we want to have support from them. And then the lay people within the church, they said actually you need to provide support to the pastors. A lot of the pastors were bivocational, meaning they were running their church plus they had a full-time job. And so if they didn't have people out there supporting them, then how are we going to be able to tend to the flock, basically? They talked about peer support and lead as an example. And they said train people within the church to be able to be a support. And they said you can call them depression experts or whatever you feel the name to call them. So we took some of this advice and we developed a faith-based stress management intervention. So why do you think we call it stress management? Mm-hmm. You say what? Exactly. So she said, avoiding the stigma and to be able to support people. So the thing is, with this intervention, everybody has stress, right? If they say they don't believe them. Everybody has some type of stress in their life. And so it's less stigmatizing to say we're going to have a stress management program. And within the program, we integrated knowing the difference between stress and depression. So that's really important. So giving people the skills they need to be able to cope with stress, but also explaining to them the difference between stress and depression, and then giving them the resources they need within the community to be able to do that. So of course I didn't do this all by myself. You can see it was a group of us working together. The folks in the middle are actually, the men on each end are actually pastors, and one is a pastor's wife, another lady is just a leader within her church. So they actually led the sessions within the church. And we're still trying to see exactly as far as the effectiveness of all these programs before we can launch them out widely. But also they mentioned changing the terminology. And so another project I worked on that was in Pine Bluff, I worked with the faith community and other people within the community to saying what is less stigmatizing. And so they told us emotional wellness. They were like, from from you all perspective, the healthcare providers, you're always looking at people when they're sick, right? And we're trying to change that mindset. It's like we always go to the doctor or the nurse practitioner when we're sick. They're like, we need to flip the script and talk about staying well. And so people don't even have to bother to go see you. And I like that because you want to focus on the positive things. So they talked about the emotional wellness of the state of health in which individuals can cope with everyday stress and life circumstances. So we want to think of it positively. I just had to do a shout out to one of my colleagues, Tiffany Haynes, who I believe has been here to speak as well. And, my slide's missing. She actually has a project that I'm working on with her as a co-investigator called Rejoice. It's renewed and empowered for the journey to overcome in Christ every day. And it's the exact thing of talking about emotional wellness and how do you maintain that status. What are the things, the skills that you need to stay emotionally well? And so if you're interested in this program coming to your church or being a participant in it, please see me afterwards because I brought some of her brochures with me. The project is actually the whole Arkansas Delta region that actually reaches over into this area. So we do have a few churches in Little Rock and North Little Rock that are already part of it. So if you're interested, I definitely can provide you more information. The other thing I wanted to share with you were some of the outreach programs that I started doing as a result of what I was hearing in the faith community. So one of them is called the Community Campus Partnership Conference to Address Health Disparities. We don't just solely focus on mental health issues, but health disparities that impact racial, ethnic minorities and just vulnerable people altogether. But we've had this conference now for 3 years. We're taking a hiatus for 2018, but we'll be back in 2019. But it's an opportunity for the faith community members to come with researchers, healthcare providers, and just talk about health issues. So often, especially within racial ethnic minority populations, how many times has a researcher reached out to a community member to say, what do you think? So it doesn't happen. So we're trying to make that platform so anybody, if you're a student, if you're a faith leader, if you're a community leader, if you're just somebody off the street and you want to come and have your voice heard of what we should be doing, this is the platform that we're trying to provide. So we had this conference, again, it was last year actually. Reverend Williams was on one of the panel discussions about mental health and the faith community last year. And from that, it was interesting. I should go back a slide. How many are familiar with Marshall Islands? Just one person. Okay, so I want to just briefly talk about the Marshall Islands. So back in the 40s, the Marshall Islands is out in the Pacific. The United States tested a bunch of bombs out in those islands. And really, you're talking about these big atomic bombs. So if you're testing bombs in somebody's backyard, what do you think that's going to do to the health and well-being of those people? They're going to make you sick. So what has happened is the U.S. government hasn't totally apologized, but at least allows the people from those islands to travel to and from the United States without any question, and they can work here freely. So for somehow, and I actually don't know how they ended up in Northwest Arkansas, but there's a huge population of Marshall Island people who are called Marshallese. And so we have a campus, UMS has a campus up in that area, and we actually have a Center for Pacific Islander Health. The interesting thing is any population that has been disenfranchised or just done basically wrong, we see similarities. So I don't speak the Marshallese language, but then when I talk to them and I hear what their experiences were, I saw so many parallels between African Americans and the Marshallese. And we realized when it came to mental health, they didn't say it the same way. They really, she said, looked at things like far as colors. And so different colors and different ways of things and how they saw mental health. But when talking to them and really thinking about it, it really resembled the experiences we are having as African Americans. And so they came and they talked, presented on some of the issues that they were having in their communities. at the conference, and we decided to partner up with some of our pastors from the Delta region to actually go to Springdale and see how we can partner moving forward. And from that came the idea of this Faith Network. So it's the Faith Academic Initiatives for Transforming Health Network. So we're trying to network churches and faith leaders from across the state to be able to address health issues within their congregations and within their communities. So as was mentioned in my bio, we received grant funding in 2016 to actually build this infrastructure for the Faith Network. And as you can see, we have a community advisory board of pastors from throughout Arkansas who are giving us some direction on where to go with this. How do you build something from scratch? And I would say Pastor Nettles is representing the AME Church, so I had to put props out there for him. He's on the end here on the left. But our vision really is to provide opportunities to develop more interventions and more programming that can be done within the church. Or if it's not done within the church, at least people from the faith community can have a say in what we're doing. Because right now, most of the research, honestly, done at UNMS, nobody's talking to the community until they're trying to recruit somebody. And we really need to be at the forefront of what is being studied, how it's being studied, and who's being studied on. Because I know you all have heard about Tuskegee, Henrietta Lacks, and everything in between as far as ethics and research, but also just being able to support people in that as well. The last thing I just want to mention is we have a training program for pastors that we're piloting right now, and faith leaders, I should say, as well. We do have Reverend Burns, and I'm forgetting her church in North Little Rock. Lee Chapel? Yes, she is actually in our pilot program right now. And we're trying to build more capacity, more understanding about research, because research, I'm so glad to see people's hands go up saying they were interested, because so often it's a turnoff. But we want to have more people at the table to be able to engage in that. So she is definitely a part of our programming. We also, through the Faith Network, are having a few summits. This past September, we had the Emotional Wellness Summit for what can the faith community do. And it was really addressing the issues that are out there and then what the faith community can actually just take steps and actually supporting each other. And so we have our second annual one coming up this September. And I hope to see you there. I don't know what time it is, but I'm going to cut myself off. And if you have any questions for me, I am more than willing to answer them.
So y'all don't just focus on depression, y'all focus on like other mental illness, like bipolar?
You know, my work has primarily been stress and depression. There is some interest now with the opioid epidemic to start doing more with substance abuse. But we've been doing mainly the major mental health disorders. So not so much bipolar, schizophrenia, those types of things. Mm-hmm.
What has the participation been like with the African American race in coming to you and asking for assistance with depression as opposed to the other races of people? How do we come forward easily, or would you share that?
You know, from a clinical perspective, we are last to show up, it seems to be. But then actually talking to the Marshallese, it sounds like they with us. So, but a lot of it is access to care as far as health insurance coverage. Or just accessibility. So depending on which community you have, you know, we're fortunate here in Central Arkansas, but once you get into the rural communities, actually having access, the waiting list to get to see someone. They're trying to do telemedicine within like some of the rural communities now, but still even you have to be linked in somewhere. But then some people don't like looking at a screen, you know, to talk to their healthcare provider. They like them in person. And the other thing is stigma to actually saying I need help and then I'm going to seek it. So we have a lot of barriers to overcome. And so that's why we're wanting the things that are low cost and things that we can try to address issues early on before someone even needs to go see professional help.
Thank you so much. Dr. Keneshia Bryant has been very helpful. We want to thank her for coming on today and sharing with us some of the things that are going on in our African American population so that we can try and right that.